Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey into the quiet corridors of medieval monastery life. Tonight we'll discover the ancient art of candle making and flame keeping, alongside people who lived in devotion to light itself during the long centuries before electricity. Whether you're settling into bed or already drifting toward deep sleep, I'm grateful you're here to explore these quiet corners of history with me. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps somewhere with electric lights glowing softly, so different from the world we're about to enter together. It's a lovely thought, all of us finding our way to deep sleep through these meditative stories from long ago. You arrive at the monastery gates on a morning when frost still clings to the stones, carrying nothing but a letter of introduction and hands that have never known the weight of devotion. The porter at the gate examines your letter for a long time, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. His fingers, you notice, are stained with something dark, perhaps ink, perhaps soot. You cannot tell. The parchment crackles slightly as he reads, and you hear the distant sound of bells calling the brothers to prayer. Prime, you will learn to call it. The first prayer of the day, when darkness still holds the edges of the sky. Brother Anselm will want to see you after chapter, the porter says, his voice soft and unhurried. Wait in the warming room, through the cloister, past the well, second door on your left. You thank him and step through the gateway into a world that smells of damp stone and wood smoke. The cloister opens before you, a covered walkway surrounding a square of garden where winter has left everything brown and sleeping. Your footsteps echo softly on the flagstones. The sound feels intrusive somehow, too loud for this place of quietness. You learn to walk more softly, placing your feet with greater care. The well at the centre of the cloister is ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of hands drawing water. A wooden bucket sits beside it, and droplets of water have frozen along the rope, creating small beads of ice that catch what little morning light penetrates the clouds. You pause here, uncertain of the way, until a young novice appears from around the corner, his arms full of kindling. The warming room, you ask? He nods toward a low doorway and continues on his way without speaking. You will learn that the brothers observe silence during certain hours, that speech is a precious thing here, carefully rationed like everything else. The warming room lives up to its name. A fire burns in a large hearth, and the air inside feels almost shocking after the cold of the cloister. Several brothers sit on benches near the fire, their hands extended toward the warmth. They glance at you briefly, then return their attention to the flames. You find a place near the door and wait. The wait is long. You count the stones in the wall to pass the time. Someone has carved them carefully, fitting them together with such precision that you can barely see the mortar between them. The light from the fire flickers across their surface, creating shadows that move and shift. The warmth seeps slowly into your bones. You realise you have been cold for days since you began your journey here. The cold had become so constant that you had almost forgotten what warmth felt like. When Brother Anselm finally arrives, you almost don't notice him. He's a man of perhaps 50 years, though it is difficult to tell. His face has the worn quality of someone who sleeps too little and works too much. His habit is clean but patched in several places, the wool faded to a soft grey. But it is his hands that draw your attention. They are marked with small burns, dozens of them, in various stages of healing. You are the one sent by Brother Thomas, he says. It is not a question. Yes, Brother Anselm. And you know the nature of the work. You hesitate. The letter had been vague, speaking only of service to the light, of learning a craft that served the divine office. I know I am to learn candle making and the keeping of the church lights. Brother Anselm nods slowly. Come then. The others have already begun their morning tasks, but you can observe today. Tomorrow you will work. You follow him back through the cloister, but this time he leads you in a different direction, toward a low building that stands apart from the main monastery structures. As you approach, you smell it. A thick, heavy scent of animal fat and beeswax, smoke and herbs. The door opens onto a large room filled with activity. 4 brothers work at different stations within the space. Near the door, a young man tends a large cauldron suspended over a fire, stirring its contents with a long wooden paddle. The mixture inside is pale yellow, steaming gently. Further back, an older brother carefully dips a series of wicks into a vat of melted tallow, then hangs them on a wooden frame to cool. Each wick already has a coating of wax building upon it, layer by thin layer. Another brother works at a table, measuring and cutting wicks from long hanks of cotton cord. And in the far corner, barely visible in the dim light, someone tends to wooden moulds, carefully extracting finished candles and setting them aside to fully harden. "This is the chandlery," Brother Anselm says, his voice carrying a note of pride. "Every candle that burns in our church, every light that illuminates the sacred page, every flame that marks the hours of prayer, all of them begin here. The warmth in this room is different from the warming room's fire. It is thicker somehow, weighted with moisture and the constant heat of working fires. You feel sweat beginning to form along your back despite the winter cold outside." Brother Anselm guides you to a bench near the wall. Sit, watch, learn the rhythm of the work before you enter into it. And so you sit and you watch. The brother at the cauldron, you will learn his name is Brother Martin, moves with a steady, unhurried rhythm. He stirs the melting fat in long, slow circles, always in the same direction, never pausing in his motion. Every few minutes he leans forward to smell the mixture, checking for signs of burning. When he is satisfied, he adds something from a small pot. Herbs, you think, though you cannot identify them. The scent in the room shifts, becomes somehow cleaner. The brother working with the dipped candles operates on a different rhythm entirely. Brother Paul, you will learn, has been making candles for 30 years. His movements have the quality of prayer about them. Dip, lift, hang, wait. Dip, lift, hang, wait. He works with 12 wicks at a time, hanging them on a rotating frame so that by the time he returns to the first wick, its coating has cooled enough to receive another layer. The growing candles turn slowly from thin threads to substantial cylinders, their surfaces smooth and even. You watch for what feels like hours. The light changes as morning progresses, streaming through the high windows in dusty beams. The brothers continue their work without speaking, without pausing, without apparent awareness of your presence. There is something hypnotic about their movements, about the repetitive nature of their tasks. Dip, stir, measure, cut. The same motions performed again and again with careful attention. Brother Anselm returns near midday. "Come," he says. "The brothers will break for sext and the midday meal. You will eat with us, and then we will begin your instruction." The refectory is a long, narrow room lined with tables. The brothers file in silently and take their places on benches. You're given a place near the end of one table, and food is set before you. Dark bread, a thin soup of beans and herbs, a piece of cheese so small it barely covers your palm. After the morning's cold and your long wait, it tastes better than you expected. One brother stands at a lectern and reads aloud while the others eat. His voice is measured and clear, reading from the lives of the saints. The story today concerns a hermit who lived in the desert, sustained by prayer and the occasional gifts of bread from passing travellers. You eat slowly, trying to make your small portion last, and listen to the familiar tale told in this unfamiliar setting. After the meal, Brother Anselm leads you not back to the chandlery, but to a small storage room filled with sacks and barrels. "Before you can make candles," he says, "you must understand what they are made from. Come here." He opens one of the sacks and removes a chunk of something pale and crumbly. "Tallow," he says, "rendered fat from sheep and cattle, the foundation of most of our candles. Feel it." You take the piece he offers. It is cool and slightly greasy, leaving a residue on your fingers. The smell is not unpleasant, but it is distinctly animal, earthy and old. "We receive tallow from the monastery farms," Brother Anselm continues. "The butchering of animals provides meat for the table, leather for shoes and book bindings, and fat for candles. Nothing is wasted. The fat arrives in crude form, full of bits of meat and blood and tissue. Our first task is to render it, to melt it slowly and carefully, straining out the impurities until only clean fat remains. He moves to another container, this one sealed with a wooden lid. When he opens it, a completely different scent fills the air, sweet, almost floral, with a richness that makes you think of summer meadows. Beeswax, he says, and his voice holds a note of reverence. Brought to us by the beekeeper from the monastery hives, this is precious. We use it only for the most important candles, those that burn on the high altar, those that mark the greatest feast days. A pound of beeswax costs what a labourer might earn in several days of work. We do not waste it. He allows you to touch this as well. The wax is firmer than the tallow, slightly sticky and much smoother. It holds the warmth of the room in a different way, seeming almost alive in your palm. Between these two substances, Brother Anselm says, lies all the art of candle making. Tallow alone burns poorly. It smokes and sputters and gives off an unpleasant smell. Beeswax alone burns beautifully but costs too much for daily use. We blend them in different proportions for different purposes. The candles for the choir stalls might be half tallow, half wax. Those for the altar, mostly wax with only enough tallow to make them affordable. The candles for the refectory and dormitory, mostly tallow with just enough wax to make them burn more cleanly. You nod, trying to commit these proportions to memory, though you suspect it will take many repetitions before you truly understand. And the wicks, you ask. Cotton, Brother Anselm replies, twisted and treated. We make them ourselves as well. Brother Timothy will teach you that task tomorrow. Today you will simply help with cleaning and preparation, the glamorous work of a chandler's apprentice. He smiles slightly as he says this, and you realise he's making a joke. There is nothing glamorous about any of the work you have seen so far. The afternoon is spent exactly as he promised, cleaning. You scrub cauldrons with sand and water, your hands growing raw from the cold water and the abrasive sand. You sweep the floor of the chandlery, gathering up bits of spilled wax and tallow, sweeping them into a bucket to be remelted and used again. Nothing wasted. You learn to bank the fires so they burn steadily without flaring, adding fuel in small amounts, watching the flames settle into an even heat. Brother Martin shows you how to clean the dipping frames, scraping away the small drips and build-ups of wax that accumulate where the candles hang. This scrapings too goes into the bucket for remelting. Your fingers grow sticky with wax, and you learn to work with this coating on your hands, accepting it as part of the craft. As the afternoon light begins to fail, Brother Anselm calls you over to where he stands beside a large barrel. One more task before Vespers, he says. We must pour off the rendered tallow while it is still liquid. The barrel contains the day's work, melted fat that has been heated and strained multiple times until it is clean and pure. Brother Anselm demonstrates the technique, tilting the barrel slightly and carefully pouring the liquid fat into smaller containers, stopping before any sediment from the bottom can flow out. The fat is the colour of old ivory, and it flows with a thick, viscous quality that reminds you somehow of honey, though the resemblance ends there. You help him with this task, learning to judge when to stop pouring, how to tilt the containers just so. The hot fat splashes once, landing on your forearm, and you gasp at the sudden burn. Brother Anselm glances at you but says nothing, simply continuing his work. You do the same, ignoring the pain, finishing the task. Later, you will have a small red mark there. It will be the first of many. The bells ring for Vespers, and the brothers set aside their work. You follow them to the church, entering through a side door into the dimness of the nave. Candles burn along the altar rail and in the choir stalls, the products of previous days' labour, you realise. Their flames are steady and golden, pushing back the darkness that gathers in the high vaulted ceiling. The brothers take their places and begin to chant. You stand in the back, uncertain of your place, and listen. The voices rise and fall in patterns that feel ancient, worn smooth by centuries of repetition. The Latin words wash over you, mostly incomprehensible, but their meaning feels less important than their sound, their rhythm. The candle flames flicker slightly in some draught you cannot feel. Shadows move across the stone walls. The smell of beeswax and incense mingles in the cold air. You realise that you are exhausted, from the journey, from the day's work, from the constant newness of everything around you. Your hands ache, your back aches. The burn on your arm throbs in time with your heartbeat. But there is something peaceful about this moment, standing in the dimness while voices chant and candles burn. Something that feels like the beginning of understanding, though you cannot yet say what it is you are beginning to understand. After the service, Brother Anselm finds you again. "Come," he says. "I will show you where you sleep." The dormitory is a long room lined with simple beds, wooden frames with straw mattresses and wool blankets. Each brother has a small space, barely enough for the bed and a chest for belongings. Brother Anselm indicates an empty bed near the end of the room. "This was Brother Edmund's place," he says. "He went to God last month. Now it is yours." You set down your small bundle of belongings and sit on the edge of the bed. The straw rustles beneath you. Through the narrow window you can see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "Rest," Brother Anselm says. "Tomorrow your true work begins. You will learn to make wicks, to judge the temperature of melting wax by sight and smell, to dip candles without leaving bubbles or thin spots. You will learn why we add herbs to the tallow, how to prevent smoking, when to trim a wick, and when to leave it alone. You will learn the prayers we say over the candles meant for the altar, the blessings that make them suitable for sacred use." He pauses at the door, looking back at you in the dimness. "You will also learn," he says, "that making candles is the easy part. The harder task is understanding what it means to be a keeper of light, to serve the flame that allows others to pray, to read, to move through darkness with confidence. That lesson takes longer to learn." And with that, he is gone, leaving you alone with your thoughts and your aching hands. You lie back on the narrow bed and stare at the ceiling beams, barely visible in the growing darkness. Somewhere in the monastery, candles still burn. In the church, perhaps, or in the scriptorium where brothers labour over manuscripts. The work you will help to sustain. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters slightly. You pull the blanket up to your chin and close your eyes. Tomorrow you will learn to twist cotton into wicks, to judge the proper thickness, to treat them so they burn evenly. Tomorrow you will begin to learn the craft that will define your days in this place. But tonight, you drift towards sleep with the smell of beeswax still clinging to your clothes, with the ache of labour in your muscles, with the question that Brother Anselm's words have planted in your mind. What does it truly mean to be a keeper of light? And how will you learn to tend not just flames, but the deeper fire that allows a community to continue its work through long centuries of darkness and cold? The bell for matins wakes you in absolute darkness. For a moment you cannot remember where you are. The straw beneath you feels wrong. The cold air smells of unfamiliar bodies and old wool, and the sound of rustling as brothers rise from their beds all around you creates a disorientation so complete that you lie frozen, trying to piece together memory and present moment. Then you remember the monastery, the chandlery, Brother Anselm's burned hands and patient instruction. You're a keeper of light now, or at least learning to become one. You rise with the others, feeling your way in the darkness to the garment pegs where your outer robe hangs. The cold settles into your bones immediately. Someone has left the shutter open a crack, and freezing air seeps through, bringing with it the smell of coming snow. You dress quickly, fumbling with ties and fastenings, and follow the dim shapes of the other brothers as they make their way toward the church. In the church, candles burn in their usual places, casting just enough light to see the prayer books, to find one's place in the choir stalls. You wonder who lit these candles, who rose even earlier than matins to prepare the lights that allow the first prayer of the day. This question follows you through the service, through the Latin phrases you cannot yet fully understand, through the long periods of standing and sitting and kneeling that mark the rhythm of monastic prayer. After matins, there is a brief period of silence before Lauds. Some brothers return to their beds for another hour of sleep. Others remain in the church, continuing their private prayers. Brother Anselm finds you in the cloister and beckons you to follow. "Today you learn wicks," he says simply. In the chandlery, Brother Timothy is already at work. He is younger than Brother Anselm, perhaps 30 years of age, with nimble fingers and a way of moving that suggests he has done this work for most of his life. Before him on the table lies a confusion of cotton fibres, raw, uncarded, tangled masses of white and cream. "This arrives from the lay brothers who work our flax and cotton fields," Brother Timothy explains, his voice soft and pleasant. "It must be cleaned, carded, spun into thread, and then twisted into wicks. Each step matters. A poorly made wick will cause a candle to gutter and smoke, no matter how pure the wax." He demonstrates the carding first, showing you how to draw the fibres across a wooden paddle set with small metal teeth, straightening them, removing any bits of seed or plant matter that remain. The motion is repetitive. Draw, turn, and your arms begin to ache within minutes. Brother Timothy works beside you, his movement steady and unhurried, the pile of carded cotton growing slowly on the table between you. "We card enough for several days at once," he says. "Then we spin, then we twist. The rhythm of the work matches the rhythm of our needs. We make wicks when we have time between other tasks, building up our supply so that we are never caught short." You work in silence for a while, listening to the soft scritch of the carding combs, the settling of the fire, the distant sound of wind against the chandlery walls. Your mind begins to wander, and you find yourself thinking about the life you left behind to come here, the family, the village, the fields you knew. All of it seems very far away now, separated not just by distance, but by this strange new rhythm of bells and silence and repetitive work. "Attention," Brother Timothy says gently, and you realise you have let the carding comb slip, tangling the fibres you were working. This work requires presence. Your mind must be here, with the cotton, with the motion. When you let your thoughts wander, the fibres sense it. You nod and return to the work with renewed focus. The fibres do seem to respond to your attention. When you concentrate, they straighten more easily. The carding goes more smoothly. Or perhaps it is simply that your hands are learning the proper pressure, the right angle of movement. After what feels like hours, Brother Timothy judges that you have carded enough. He sweeps the prepared cotton into a basket and carries it to a different table, where a spinning wheel waits. This is a tool you have seen before. Women in your village spun thread for weaving, but you have never used one yourself. "Watch first," Brother Timothy says. He seats himself at the wheel and begins to work. His foot presses the treadle in a steady rhythm, setting the wheel spinning. His fingers draw out the cotton fibres, feeding them to the wheel, and the wheel transforms them into thread, thin, even, surprisingly strong. The thread winds onto a spindle, growing layer by layer. The motion is hypnotic, the sound of the wheel like a quiet song. "Now you try," he says after a time. You take his place at the wheel. Immediately everything goes wrong. The treadle moves too fast, then too slow. The thread you produce is lumpy and uneven, thick in some places and dangerously thin in others. The cotton fibres seem to fight your attempts to control them, bunching up or pulling apart at the worst moments. Brother Timothy watches patiently. "Again," he says when you produce a particularly terrible length of thread. "The wheel must turn at the same speed always. Your foot controls this. Count in your mind. 1, 2, 3, 4. Press on 1. Let the wheel complete its turn. Press again on 1. You try this, counting silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The wheel begins to find a rhythm. Your thread improves slightly, though it is still far from the even perfection that Brother Timothy produces. "Good," he says. "That is enough for today. Your foot will learn the rhythm while you sleep. Tomorrow it will be easier. You're grateful for this respite. Your leg aches from working the treadle, and your fingers feel clumsy and thick from trying to control the cotton fibres. But Brother Timothy is not finished with your instruction. Come, he says. Now you will see how we twist thread into wick. At another table, Brother Paul, the same brother you watched dipping candles yesterday, works with several lengths of spun thread. He has anchored one end of the threads to a hook on the wall and holds the other ends in his hand, twisting them together with a practiced motion. As he twists, the individual threads merge into a single cord, stronger than any of its component parts. 3 threads for a common wick, Brother Paul explains. 5 for a larger candle, 7 for the great altar candles. The twisting must be tight but not too tight, loose enough that the melted wax can climb the wick through capillary action, tight enough that the wick maintains its structure when burning. He demonstrates the proper tension, letting you feel the cord between your fingers. Then he sets you to work making 3-strand wicks. You anchor the threads to the wall hook and begin to twist, trying to maintain the same even pressure that Brother Paul showed you. This task, at least, comes more easily than spinning. Your hands seem to understand the motion, and soon you have produced several lengths of serviceable wick. Brother Paul examines them carefully, running each one through his fingers, testing their consistency. Acceptable, he says, which seems to be high praise from him. Make 20 more before the bell for terce. They need not be perfect, only consistent. And so you twist wicks while Brother Paul returns to his dipping, and Brother Timothy cards more cotton. The chandlery fills with the quiet sounds of work. The spinning wheels hum, the soft splash of wicks entering melted wax, the whisper of carding combs, the fire crackles. Outside you hear the monastery bell marking the passage of time, calling the brothers to prayer. You work through terce, through prime, through the morning hours that run together in a blur of repetitive motion. Your fingers develop a callus where the thread rubs against them. Your shoulders ache from holding your arms in the same position. But the pile of finished wicks grows steadily, and with each one you make, the process becomes slightly more natural, slightly less conscious. Brother Anselm appears near midday, as the bell for sext begins to ring. He examines the wicks you have made, holding them up to the light, testing their strength by pulling firmly on each end. Good, he says. These will serve. After the meal, you will learn to cut them to proper lengths and prepare them for dipping. But first you must eat and rest. A tired chandler makes poor candles. The meal is similar to yesterday's. Dark bread, thin soup, a morsel of cheese. But today your hunger makes it taste even better. You realise you have been standing and working for hours without pause, and your body craves fuel. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, listening to the brother at the lectern read from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. The words seem to resonate differently here, in this place dedicated to the making of light. You think about the candles burning in the church, about the work of your hands that will become flames pushing back darkness. There is something profound in this connection between physical labour and spiritual metaphor, though you cannot quite articulate what it is. After the meal, Brother Anselm leads you to a different part of the chandlery, where finished wicks hang in bundles from wooden pegs. He takes down one bundle and spreads the wicks across a measuring board, a long plank of wood marked with lines at regular intervals. Each candle requires a wick of specific length, he explains. A wick too short will drown in melted wax before the candle is fully consumed. A wick too long wastes material and may cause uneven burning. We measure carefully. He shows you the different lengths, short wicks for small votive candles, medium wicks for the standard tapers used in the choir stalls, long wicks for the substantial altar candles that must burn for hours. You learn to measure and cut, using a sharp knife to slice cleanly through the twisted cord. The cut ends must be sealed briefly in flame to prevent unravelling, so you hold each one to a candle for just a moment, watching the fibres shrink and harden. Now, Brother Anselm says when you have cut several dozen wicks, you will learn the most important skill, how to prepare the wax. He leads you to the large cauldron where tallow and beeswax melt together over a carefully tended fire. The mixture bubbles gently, its surface moving with slow, viscous motion. The scent is thick and heavy, the sweet perfume of beeswax cutting through the earthier smell of rendered fat. The temperature must be just right, Brother Anselm says. Too hot, and the wax will be thin and runny, producing candles that burn too quickly. Too cool, and the wax will not adhere properly to the wick, leaving gaps and imperfections. Watch. He dips his finger briefly into the wax so quickly that you barely see the motion. Then he examines the coating on his fingertip, rubbing it between his thumb and forefinger. Feel this, he says, offering his hand. You touch the wax on his finger. It has already begun to cool, turning from liquid to solid. The texture is smooth, slightly tacky, firm enough to hold its shape but soft enough to leave an impression when you press it. This is proper temperature, Brother Anselm says. Learn to recognise it. When the wax feels like this, you may begin dipping. If it is too hot, it will run like water. If it is too cool, it will feel grainy and thick. You nod, trying to commit this sensation to memory, knowing that it will take many repetitions before you can truly judge the wax by touch alone. Now watch Brother Paul, Brother Anselm says. Watch how he dips. Brother Paul has already begun the afternoon's work. He takes a prepared wick and dips it into the vat of melted wax, submerging it completely. Then he lifts it out in one smooth, steady motion, holding it vertical so the excess wax drips back into the vat. The wick, now coated with a thin layer of wax, goes onto the drying frame. He moves to the next wick, and the next, working through a set of 12 before returning to the first. By the time he returns to the first wick, its coating has cooled and hardened. He dips it again, adding another layer. The wick grows fractionally thicker. Again he works through all 12 wicks before returning to the first. Dip, lift, hang. Dip, lift, hang. The rhythm is steady, unhurried, almost meditative. A good candle requires 30 to 40 dippings, Brother Anselm says, sometimes more for the larger altar candles. Each layer must cool completely before receiving the next, or the wax will remain soft at the centre, and the candle will bend or collapse. Patience is essential. You watch for a long time, studying Brother Paul's technique. The way he holds the wick, the speed of his lifting motion, the exact angle at which he hangs each dipped candle to ensure even cooling. The work seems simple at first glance, but you're beginning to understand that simplicity often conceals great complexity. You may try, Brother Anselm says eventually. Take 6 wicks, work slowly, watch what the wax does. You select 6 prepared wicks and approach the dipping vat with a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. The first dip goes well enough. You submerge the wick, lift it smoothly, hang it on the frame. But when you move to the second wick, you see that you lifted the first one too quickly. The wax coating is uneven, thicker at the bottom than the top. The excess has not dripped away properly. Brother Anselm says nothing, simply watches as you continue. By the 6th wick, you are beginning to understand the proper speed of lifting, the importance of holding the wick perfectly vertical. When you return to the first wick for its second coating, you try to compensate for its uneven first layer by lifting it more slowly, but this only makes matters worse. The second layer adds too much wax to the already thick bottom, and the candle begins to develop a bulge. Stop, Brother Anselm says gently. These 6 will not make good candles. We will melt them down and use them again, but you are learning. Try another 6. And so you do. 6 more wicks, 40 dippings each, your arms growing tired from the repeated motion of lifting and hanging. These turn out better than the first set, though still far from perfect. One has a slight twist in its body where you hung it improperly. Another has a thin spot where you lifted too quickly on the 15th dipping. But 4 of them are acceptable. Not beautiful, but functional. Better, Brother Anselm says. Tomorrow you will make more. Each day your hands will learn. Each day the candles will improve. The afternoon wears on. You make more wicks. You help Brother Martin stir the rendering tallow, learning to recognise when it needs more heat, when it needs less, when it is ready to strain through clean linen into storage containers. You sweep the floor again, gathering up the fallen drips of wax, adding them to the remelting pot. You learn to bank the fires for the night, covering them with ash so they will hold their heat until morning when they can be easily revived. As the light outside begins to fail, Brother Anselm shows you one more task. From a locked chest, he removes several finished candles that are different from the others you have seen. These are pure white, made entirely of beeswax, and they are thicker and more carefully shaped than the common tapers. These are for the altar, he says. They require special preparation. After they are made, we must bless them. He sets the candles on a clean cloth and opens a small book of prayers. His voice is soft as he reads, speaking Latin words over the white candles. You do not understand most of the words, but you recognise some. Lux, for light. Benedictio, for blessing. Sanctus, for holy. When he finishes, he makes the sign of the cross over the candles and carefully wraps them in clean linen. These will burn on the high altar during the Feast of Candlemas, he says. They must be perfect. No imperfections in the wax, no irregularities in the burning. When a candle burns before the host, it must be worthy of that position. This is why we pray over them, why we take such care in their making. You help him return the blessed candles to their storage place, handling them carefully, aware of their sacred purpose. The weight of responsibility settles on you, the understanding that your work is not merely practical but devotional, that every candle you make will serve the prayer life of this community. The bells ring for Vespers, and once again you follow the brothers to the church. The candles burning there tonight include some that you helped to make, not the ones you dipped yourself, which are still too new, but the ones whose wicks you twisted, whose wax you stirred. There is a strange pride in seeing them burn, in knowing that your labour contributes to this moment of prayer. After Vespers comes Compline, the final prayer of the day. Then the brothers file silently to the dormitory, and the monastery settles into the great silence that will last until matins. You lie in your narrow bed, exhausted beyond measure, your hands aching, your arms sore, your mind still turning over all that you have learned. The darkness is absolute. You cannot see your hand before your face, but somewhere in the monastery, candles still burn. In the church, perhaps a single flame remains lit before the altar. In the infirmary, a candle burns beside the bed of Brother Sebastian, who is ill. In the scriptorium, maybe one dedicated brother continues his copying work by candlelight, reluctant to leave his manuscript unfinished. All those flames, you think, depend on work like yours, on wicks twisted carefully, on wax blended to proper proportions, on the patient accumulation of thin layers. The light that allows the monastery to function through the dark winter months exists because people like Brother Paul and Brother Timothy and Brother Anselm wake early and work late, tending fires and stirring pots and dipping wicks until their hands bear the permanent marks of their craft. You flex your fingers in the darkness, feeling the new calluses forming, the tender spot where you burned yourself on hot wax. These marks will fade and be replaced by others, and those by others still, until your hands tell the story of your years in the chandlery, just as Brother Anselm's hands tell the story of his decades of service. But there is something Brother Anselm said yesterday that still puzzles you, that keeps you awake even though your body craves sleep. He said that making candles is the easy part, that the harder task is understanding what it means to be a keeper of light. You have learned today how to twist wicks and judge wax temperature and dip candles with patient repetition. But what is this deeper understanding he spoke of? How does one learn to be not just a maker of light but a keeper of it? And what exactly is the difference between these two things? The days begin to blur together. each one following the same pattern of bells and work and prayer. You wake in darkness for matins, stumble through prayers you still only half understand, and make your way to the chandlery as the first grey light touches the eastern sky. The work becomes familiar, carding cotton, spinning thread, twisting wicks, dipping candles. Your hands learn the motions without conscious thought, and the calluses that were tender at first grow thick and useful. Brother Timothy tells you one morning that 3 weeks have passed since your arrival. You're surprised. It feels both longer and shorter than that. Longer because the life you lived before seems impossibly distant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Shorter because you still feel like a beginner, still make mistakes that require correction, still produce candles that must be melted down and remade. But the brothers tell you that you are learning well. Brother Paul nods approvingly when you complete a set of choir candles without any obvious imperfections. Brother Martin allows you to judge the temperature of the rendering tallow without checking your assessment. These small acknowledgements feel like great achievements. Winter deepens around the monastery. Snow falls heavily 1 week, covering the cloister garden and muffling all sound. The brothers must shovel paths between buildings, and the chandlery becomes even more important. Candles are needed not just for prayer but for basic navigation through the dark hours that now stretch long into morning and begin again in mid-afternoon. You learn to make different types of candles for different purposes. The rushlights that burn in the dormitory are simplest, dried rushes dipped in tallow, quick to make and cheap to produce, though they burn with a smoky, uneven flame. The choir candles require more care, a blend of tallow and beeswax that burns cleanly enough for the brothers to read their psalters by. The altar candles are made with the greatest attention, mostly beeswax blessed with prayers, formed to exact specifications. Brother Anselm teaches you about proportions. Too much tallow makes a candle that smokes and drips. Too much beeswax makes a candle too expensive for regular use. The art lies in finding the perfect balance for each purpose. A candle for the refectory needs only enough beeswax to prevent excessive smoke, perhaps 1 part wax to 3 parts tallow. A candle for reading requires more wax, equal parts or even 2 parts wax to 1 part tallow. The great altar candles might be 4 parts wax to 1 part tallow, or even pure wax for the highest feast days. "We serve the light," Brother Anselm says one afternoon as you work together, measuring out wax for a batch of refectory candles. "But we also serve the community's resources. A chandler who makes every candle from pure beeswax serves his own pride, not his brother's. We make the best candle that each purpose requires, no better and no worse. You measure the tallow carefully, adding it to the melting pot. The work has become meditative. Your hands know what to do, leaving your mind free to wander. Sometimes you pray silently as you work. Sometimes you simply exist in the rhythm of the task, thinking of nothing in particular. Brother Timothy says this is good, that the best work happens when the mind is quiet, and the hands are allowed to remember what they have learned. One morning, Brother Anselm tells you that you will learn a new skill. He leads you to a part of the chandlery you have not worked in before, where wooden moulds lean against the wall. These moulds are carved from hardwood, hollow tubes of varying sizes sealed at one end. Moulded candles, Brother Anselm explains, for special purposes, the large candles that stand in the sanctuary, the decorative candles for feast days. Dipped candles serve most needs, but sometimes we require a candle of specific size and perfect uniformity. He shows you how to prepare the mould, coating the interior with a thin layer of oil so the finished candle will release easily. Then he threads a wick through a small hole in the sealed end, pulling it taut and tying it to a stick that rests across the open top of the mould. The wick hangs perfectly centred in the hollow space. The wax must be hotter for moulding than for dipping, he says, hot enough to flow smoothly and fill every space, but not so hot that it cracks when cooling. Watch the surface. When it moves like water rather than oil, it is ready. He pours melted wax into the prepared mould, filling it in one smooth motion. The wax level drops slightly as it settles, and he adds a bit more to bring it flush with the top. Then he sets the mould aside to cool. These must cool slowly, he says. Too fast and the wax will crack or pull away from the sides. We leave them overnight at least, sometimes longer for the largest moulds. You help him prepare more moulds, learning to judge when the wax is the right temperature, how to pour without creating bubbles, how to secure the wick so it stays centred. The work requires a different kind of attention than dipping, more concentrated, more precise. There is no opportunity to correct mistakes as layers build up. The moulded candle must be right the first time. The weeks continue to pass. You learn to add herbs to the tallow, lavender to sweeten the scent, rosemary to help the candles burn more cleanly. Brother Martin shows you which herbs to use and in what quantities, making you smell each one, teaching you to recognise them by scent alone, since you will often work in dim light, where seeing clearly is difficult. You learn to trim wicks to the proper length before burning. Too long, and the flame will be too large and smoky, too short and it will drown in melted wax. Brother Paul demonstrates the technique, using small scissors to cut each wick to exactly the right length. He does this by touch, his fingers measuring the wick against some internal standard. When you try, your measurements are inconsistent, but he tells you this too will come with practice. One evening after Compline, Brother Anselm finds you in the dormitory. "Come," he says quietly. "There is something you should see." You follow him through the dark cloister to the church. Inside, all is dark except for the sanctuary, where a single large candle burns before the tabernacle. This is the sanctuary lamp, Brother Anselm explains. A candle that must never be allowed to go out, that burns continuously day and night as a sign of God's eternal presence. Someone must tend this flame, Brother Anselm says. We take turns, the chandlers. 1 week in every 4. You will be responsible for ensuring this candle never fails. You must check it morning and evening, replace it before it burns too low, keep the holder clean of wax drippings. You look at the steady flame, feeling the weight of this responsibility. This is not just making candles for others to use. This is direct guardianship of an important flame. Next week you will take your first turn, Brother Anselm says. I will help you, will show you what must be done, but you should know now that this duty will be yours. The keeper of light does not just make light, he tends it, guards it, ensures it continues. You nod slowly, understanding that you are being entrusted with something significant. The sanctuary lamp is not just a candle, it is a symbol, a prayer made visible, a reminder that some things must not be allowed to go dark. The winter nights grow longer. The monastery consumes more candles as the hours of darkness stretch. You work longer days in the chandlery, making sure the supply never runs short. Your hands move automatically through the familiar tasks, dipping, stirring, measuring, cutting. The brothers rarely need to correct you now. Your candles are consistently good, if not yet masterful. Brother Paul begins to teach you about flame itself, how to read a candle's burning to diagnose problems. A flame that gutters and smokes means the wick is too thick or the wax too soft. A flame that burns blue at the base means impurities in the wax. A flame that sputters and spits means moisture has entered the candle somehow. You learn to see these signs, to understand what they mean. A good chandler, Brother Paul says, can look at a burning candle and know everything about how it was made. The proportions of wax and tallow, the twist of the wick, the temperature at which it was dipped. The flame tells the truth about the candle's making. You begin to notice these things as you move through the monastery. In the refectory you see a candle burning with a slightly smoky flame and know that the batch was made with too much tallow. In the choir stall you notice a candle that burns unevenly and recognise that its wick was not centred properly during dipping. These observations come unbidden. Your eye has learned to see what it once could not. One morning Brother Anselm asks you to help him with a special task. The abbot has requested candles for a visiting bishop. Fine candles, made of beeswax, decorated with a special technique. Brother Anselm shows you how to apply gold leaf to the surface of a finished candle, pressing the delicate sheets of gold onto slightly softened wax, creating beautiful patterns. These are rare occasions, Brother Anselm says as you work together, carefully applying the precious gold. We do not make decorated candles often, but when we do, we remember that our work serves not just our own community, but the larger church. These candles will burn in a cathedral. They will be seen by hundreds of faithful. They must be worthy of that honour. The work is painstaking, requiring absolute steadiness of hand. The gold leaf is so thin that your breath can disturb it. You must press it onto the wax with exactly the right pressure. Too light, and it will not adhere. Too heavy, and you will damage the candle's surface. Brother Anselm works with practised ease, but you struggle, ruining several attempts before finally producing an acceptable result. Better, Brother Anselm says, when you complete your first successful decorated candle. You're learning not just to make candles, but to make them beautiful. This too is part of our service. The days shorten toward the winter solstice. The chandlery is busy from prime until compline, all the brothers working to maintain the supply of light that the dark season demands. You fall into bed each night exhausted, your dreams filled with flickering flames and the smell of beeswax. But somewhere in this repetition, something changes. You cannot name exactly when it happens, but one day you realise that the work no longer feels like labour you must consciously direct. Your hands know what to do, your eyes know what to look for, your nose knows when the wax is the right temperature. The craft has sunk into your body, become part of how you move through the world. Brother Timothy notices this shift. You're becoming a chandler, he says simply, and you understand that this is both acknowledgement and encouragement. You are becoming, but have not yet fully become. What remains to learn, you wonder? Your candles are good. You can work without supervision. You understand the techniques, the materials, the purposes. What more is there? But you remember Brother Anselm's words from your first day, that making candles is the easy part, and you sense that whatever deeper understanding he spoke of still eludes you, that there is something about being a keeper of light that goes beyond technical skill, beyond the ability to produce a good candle, something that has to do with why the work matters, with what it means to serve the light rather than simply making it. The question follows you into sleep, unanswered, but somehow comforting in its mystery, like a prayer whose words you have not yet learned but whose meaning you are, beginning to sense. The week arrives when you must tend the sanctuary lamp. Brother Anselm walks with you to the church after prime on the first morning of your responsibility. The lamp burns steadily before the tabernacle, its flame small but unwavering in the still air. This candle will burn for approximately 18 hours, Brother Anselm says. You must check it at prime and again at vespers. If it has burned below half its length, replace it. Never let it burn so low that it might fail during the night hours when no one is here to notice. He shows you where the replacement candles are kept, in a small cupboard built into the wall of the sanctuary, hidden from view but easily accessible. The candles stored here are special, made from the purest beeswax, blessed individually, wrapped in linen to keep them clean. The holder must be cleaned each time you change the candle, Brother Anselm continues. Scrape away the dripped wax, wipe it clean with a cloth. Any build-up will affect how the new candle sits, may cause it to lean or burn unevenly. You watch as he demonstrates, removing the old candle, still burning, still useful, but low enough that it should not remain through another day. He scrapes the holder carefully, his movements practised and efficient. Then he unwraps a new candle, lights it from the old flame, and sets it in the cleaned holder. Never let the flame go out, he says. Always light the new from the old. This flame has burned continuously for longer than anyone can remember. Some say it has burned since the monastery was founded 200 years ago. Whether that is true or merely legend, we treat it as if it were true. This flame must not fail while you are its keeper. The responsibility settles heavily on your shoulders. You nod, accepting it. For the next 7 days you visit the sanctuary twice daily. In the morning after prime you check the flame, judge whether the candle needs replacing, clean the holder when necessary. In the evening after vespers you do the same. The rhythm becomes familiar quickly, but you never lose the slight anxiety that comes with the task. the awareness that you are responsible for something that must not be allowed to fail. On the fourth day, you arrive for your evening check and find the candle burning lower than expected. You do not know why. Perhaps this particular candle was slightly shorter than usual, or perhaps it burned faster for some reason. But it is clear that it will not last through the night. You must replace it now. Your hands shake slightly as you perform the task. You scrape the holder clean, unwrap a fresh candle, light it from the dying flame. The transfer takes only moments, but in those moments you're acutely aware of how fragile fire is, how easily it could be extinguished by a careless movement, a sudden draft. When the new candle is burning steadily, you allow yourself to breathe again. Brother Anselm finds you afterward in the cloister. You changed the lamp early, he says. Yes, it was burning low. Good. This is judgment, knowing when to act, not waiting until action is forced upon you. A keeper of light must anticipate, must understand the flame well enough to know what it needs before the need becomes critical. His words stay with you. Anticipation. Understanding. These are skills beyond technique, beyond the mechanical knowledge of how to make a candle. They require attention, presence, a kind of relationship with the flame itself. Your week as lampkeeper ends, and another chandler takes your place. But something has shifted in how you understand your work. You find yourself noticing flames throughout the monastery, reading them, assessing them, anticipating their needs. In the refectory, you see a candle burning unevenly and quietly replace it before anyone asks. In the choir stall, you notice a wick that needs trimming and attend to it between prayers. The winter solstice arrives, bringing the longest night of the year. The monastery marks this with a special vigil, keeping watch through the darkness with prayers and candles. Every chandler works extra hours in preparation, making sure there are enough candles to sustain the light through this extended observance. You work beside Brother Paul, dipping candles in comfortable silence. The repetitive motion has become almost restful now. Dip, lift, hang, move to the next. Your mind drifts as your hands work, thinking about the years turning, about darkness and light, about the way the seasons mark their passage through flame and shadow. You're quiet today, Brother Paul observes. I was thinking about the solstice, you reply, about how we mark time with light. Brother Paul nods slowly. The ancient peoples lit great fires at the solstice. They feared the darkness would continue forever, that the sun might not return. They burned fires to encourage it, to show it the way back. We light candles for different reasons now, but perhaps some echo of that old fear remains. The understanding that light is precious, that darkness is powerful, that we must tend the flame carefully. That night the vigil begins at Compline and continues until Lord's the following morning. The church is filled with candles, more than you have ever seen burning at once. They stand on the altar, in the choir stalls, along the walls, in every niche and corner. The brothers take turns keeping watch, praying through the long hours of darkness. You take your turn in the hours after midnight. The church is silent except for the whisper of your own prayers and the barely audible sound of candle flames breathing. You watch the lights flicker and steady, flicker and steady, each flame a small defiance against the winter dark. Something about this long watching opens a space in your mind. You think about all the candles you've made, all the wicks you've twisted, all the hours spent stirring tallow and judging wax temperature. Every one of those candles was made for moments, like this, for the times when people need light, when darkness presses close, when a flame becomes more than just illumination, but a statement of hope, of persistence, of refusal to surrender to the dark. This is what Brother Anselm meant, you think. This is the deeper understanding. You do not make candles for the sake of making them. You make them so that nights like this can happen, so that people can gather in the dark hours and hold light in their hands, so that prayers can be said and books can be read and paths can be walked safely. You serve not the candle but what the candle allows. When your watch ends and another brother comes to relieve you, you walk slowly back to the dormitory. The sky is still dark, but you sense dawn approaching. The year has turned. The days will lengthen now, slowly but certainly. The light returns, as it always does. Winter continues, but its deepest dark has passed. The work in the chandlery goes on. Candles must be made regardless of season, regardless of weather. But you notice that Brother Anselm begins giving you more responsibility. He sends you to check the church candles alone, trusting you to assess what needs replacing. He asks you to train a new novice in the basics of wick making. He consults you about proportions and temperatures, treating your opinion as worthy of consideration. You are ready, he says one morning, to learn the final skill, how to make candles for the dying. He leads you to the infirmary, where Brother Sebastian lies in a narrow bed. The old monk has been ill for weeks, growing steadily weaker. A single candle burns on a table beside his bed, and Brother Anselm carries 2 more unlit, wrapped carefully in clean linen. When a brother nears death, Brother Anselm explains quietly, we place blessed candles beside him. They burn through his final hours, lighting his passage from this world to the next. These candles must be perfect, made from pure beeswax, blessed with special prayers, tended with absolute attention. The dying brother must not pass into darkness. You watch as Brother Anselm checks the burning candle, judges that it will last several more hours, places the wrapped replacements nearby where they will be ready when needed. His movements are gentle, reverent, as if the candles themselves are sacred objects. This is the most important work we do, Brother Anselm says as you walk back to the chandlery. Not the making of hundreds of candles for daily use, but the making of these few candles that accompany the dying. This is when light matters most, at the threshold between life and death, between the known world and the unknown. We give what comfort we can through our craft. That afternoon, you help him make a new batch of death candles. The work is slow, careful, prayer-filled. Between each dipping, Brother Anselm says a blessing. The finished candles are wrapped individually and stored in a special chest. You hope they will not be needed soon, but you understand they will be needed eventually. Death comes to everyone, and when it comes, the chandlers must be ready. Brother Sebastian dies 3 days later, in the hour before dawn. You're not there when it happens, but you learn of it at prime. The candles burned beside him until the end, Brother Anselm tells you. He did not pass into darkness. The monastery observes its rituals of mourning, prayers for the dead, a simple burial in the cemetery beyond the cloister. You help make the candles that will burn during the funeral mass, pure white tapers that stand on either side of the bier. As you work, you think about Brother Sebastian, whom you barely knew, whose bed you now sleep in. The continuity of the community. One brother dies, another takes his place. The work continues. The light continues. Spring begins to arrive, slowly at first. The snow melts in patches, revealing brown earth beneath. The days grow noticeably longer. In the chandlery, the pace of work shifts slightly. You're making fewer candles now that the dark hours are shorter, but the candles you make must still be of good quality, still serve their purposes well. Brother Anselm teaches you to make candles for the Easter Vigil, special tapers that will be lit from the new fire, that will be carried in procession through the dark church, bringing light to every corner. These candles must burn brightly, but not too quickly, must be easy to carry without dripping hot wax on the bearer's hands. The proportions are specific, the technique exacting. You work on these Easter candles for weeks, making batch after batch until Brother Anselm is satisfied with their quality. Your hands know the work so well now that you can perform it almost without thinking, leaving your mind free to wander or to pray, or simply to rest in the quiet rhythm of the task. One warm afternoon in early spring, Brother Anselm calls you to walk with him in the monastery garden. The fruit trees are beginning to bud, and the first green shoots of herbs push through the soil. You walk slowly along the gravel paths, not speaking at first, simply enjoying the mild air and the sound of birds returning from their winter territories. You have been with us nearly 6 months, Brother Anselm says eventually. You have learned the craft well. Your candles are as good as any in the chandlery. Thank you, brother. But I wonder, he continues, if you have learned what I hoped you would learn, Do you understand now what it means to be a keeper of light? You consider the question carefully, thinking about the sanctuary lamp, about the winter vigil, about the candles beside Brother Sebastian's deathbed. I think, you say slowly, that it means understanding that we do not serve ourselves. We serve those who need light, for prayer, for work, for comfort at the hour of death. Every candle we make is made for someone else's need. Brother Anselm nods. Yes, that is part of it. But there is more, I think. Do you remember your first day when I said that the harder task is understanding what it means to be a keeper of light? I remember. Making a candle is a finite task, Brother Anselm says. It has a beginning, a middle, an end. You make the candle, and it is done. But keeping light, that is not finite. That is a continuous responsibility. The lamp must always burn. The church must never be dark. When one candle fails, another must be ready. This is what makes you a keeper, rather than simply a maker. You hold responsibility for the continuing of light. You walk in silence for a while, letting his words settle. The continuing of light. Yes, that is what you have been learning through all these months of repetitive work. Not just how to make a single perfect candle, but how to ensure that the light never fails, that there is always another candle ready, always someone watching, always the materials and skill and will to push back darkness. I understand, you say quietly. But do you truly understand? Or is there still something more to learn? Some deeper layer of meaning that will only reveal itself through more time, more work, more watching of flames in the darkness. Summer arrives slowly, bringing longer days and shorter nights. The monastery adjusts its rhythms. Fewer candles are needed for the night offices, and the chandlery's work shifts toward preparing supplies for the coming winter. You render tallow in large batches while the weather is warm enough to keep the fires burning outside. You card and spin cotton on the long afternoons when the heat makes indoor work uncomfortable. The pace is different from winter's urgency, more measured and anticipatory. Brother Anselm asks you one morning to take inventory of the wax stores. You descend into the cool cellar where the supplies are kept, carrying a candle to light your way. The shelves hold barrels of rendered tallow, sealed containers of beeswax, bundles of prepared wicks, bags of herbs. You count each item carefully, marking quantities on a wax tablet, noting which supplies are running low and will need replenishing before autumn arrives. The work takes most of the morning. When you emerge back into daylight, you find Brother Timothy in the chandlery, working alone at the spinning wheel. He looks up as you enter. Brother Anselm wants to see you in the scriptorium, he says. Something about special candles for the illuminators. You find Brother Anselm in conversation with Brother Jerome, the head of the scriptorium. They stand beside a copying desk where an unfinished manuscript lies open, its margins decorated with elaborate drawings in brilliant colours. Brother Jerome is explaining something about the work that continues after dark, how the copyists need good light, but the candles they have been using cast too much heat, making the ink behave unpredictably. We need candles that burn cooler, Brother Jerome says, bright enough to work by, but without the heat that troubles the ink. Brother Anselm turns to you. What would you suggest? The question surprises you. He has never asked for your opinion so directly before, in front of another brother, as if your judgment carries weight. You think carefully, considering what you know about candle composition and burning characteristics. Beeswax burns cooler than tallow, you say slowly. But pure beeswax candles would be expensive for regular scriptorium use. Perhaps a blend, 3 parts wax to 1 part tallow, and thinner candles so each flame is smaller, but we use more of them to provide adequate light. Brother Anselm nods thoughtfully. We could try this. Make a dozen test candles in the proportion suggested. Brother Jerome can use them for a week and report whether they serve the need. You spend the afternoon preparing the test batch. The proportions are different from what you usually work with. More beeswax than you would normally use for everyday candles, but not so much that the cost becomes prohibitive. You dip the candles thinner than usual, careful to keep them uniform. The work requires concentration, attention to each small detail. When the candles are finished and cooled, you deliver them to the scriptorium yourself. Brother Jerome examines them carefully, holding one up to the light, testing its weight in his hand. We will try them tonight, he says. Thank you for your craft. Walking back to the chandlery, you feel something you have not felt before, a sense of being consulted as an expert, of having knowledge that others need and respect. The feeling is strange, but not unpleasant. You have become, without quite noticing when it happened, someone whose judgment matters. The summer weeks pass in their slower rhythm. The test candles work well, and you begin producing them regularly for the scriptorium. Brother Anselm teaches you to make tapers for outdoor processions, candles that can withstand wind without guttering, protected by small metal guards that shield the flame. You learn to make votive candles for the side chapels, small lights that burn for hours in their red glass holders. One evening after Compline, unable to sleep despite your tiredness, you return to the church. The building is empty and mostly dark, lit only by the sanctuary lamp and a few small candles burning before side altars. You sit in one of the choir stalls and let the silence settle around you. The sanctuary lamp flickers slightly, drawing your eye. You study its flame, steady, well trimmed, burning cleanly. A good candle, properly tended. You remember your first week as lamp keeper, the anxiety you felt about maintaining that continuous flame. Now it seems almost simple, though you know it is not simple at all, that it requires constant attention and care from everyone who shares the responsibility. Footsteps echo softly on the stone floor. Brother Anselm appears from the shadows and takes a seat nearby. He says nothing at first, simply sitting in companionable silence. After a while he speaks quietly. "You come here often in the evening now. I have noticed." "Yes," you reply, "I find it peaceful, and I like to watch the candles burn to see how they are serving their purpose." "You're learning to read the flames," Brother Anselm says. "This is good, but I wonder what else you see when you sit here in the darkness." You consider the question, what do you see? The obvious answer is candles, light, shadows, but you sense he is asking about something deeper. "I see the work of many hands," you say slowly. "Not just our hands in the chandlery, but all the brothers who came before us. The monks who built this church, who carved these stalls, who established the rhythms of prayer that continue day after day. I see continuity, I suppose, the way things are maintained across time." Brother Anselm nods. "Yes, continuity is part of it. The light we tend today is the same light that has been tended for generations. Not the same candles, of course. Those burn and are replaced. But the same commitment, the same understanding that the light must continue." You sit in silence again, watching the sanctuary lamp. A thought occurs to you, a question you have been wondering about but have not yet asked. "Brother Anselm, why did you become a chandler? Surely there are other crafts, other forms of service to the community." He is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is thoughtful, as if he is discovering his answer even as he gives it. "I was a child when I came here," he says, "an oblate given to the monastery by parents who could not feed all their children. I was 7 years old. Everything here frightened me. The large buildings, the silent brothers, the strange rhythms so different from the farm where I was born. I cried often, especially at night when darkness filled the dormitory." He pauses, and you wait, sensing there is more. "The brother who cared for the oblates noticed my fear of the dark. He began teaching me to help with the candles, simple tasks at first, just carrying them to the church, helping to light them before services. He told me that I could fight my fear by serving the light, by learning to be one of the people who kept darkness at bay. I was young and took this very literally. I thought if I made enough candles, I would never have to be afraid of the dark again." "And were you right?" you ask softly. Brother Anselm smiles slightly. "In a way, yes. Not because the darkness became less dark, but because I learned that I had a role in answering it. The darkness is powerful. It returns every night. It fills every space where light is absent. But we have our small power too, the ability to make flame, to maintain it, to ensure it continues. This is not a victory over darkness, perhaps, but it is a response to it, a faithful response. His words resonate with something in your own experience. You think about the winter vigil, about the candles beside Brother Sebastian's deathbed, about the sanctuary lamp that must never fail. All of these are responses to darkness, not eliminations of it, but faithful presences within it. Is that why you stayed in the chandlery, you ask, even after you grew up and were no longer afraid? I stayed because I discovered that the work mattered to me, Brother Anselm says. Not just the practical necessity of making candles, but the meaning beneath the making. Every candle is an act of hope, you see. We make them believing that someone will need light, that the darkness will not have the final word. This hope, renewed daily through our work, became the centre of my life. You absorb this, turning it over in your mind. Hope. Yes, that is what you have been learning without naming it. That the chandler's work is fundamentally hopeful, fundamentally oriented toward the belief that light matters, that it is worth the labour of maintaining it. Do you ever doubt, you ask? Ever wonder if the work matters as much as you believe? Brother Anselm considers this. Yes, he says finally. Of course I doubt, especially on the difficult days when the wax refuses to behave properly, when candles crack in their moulds, when the fire burns too hot or too cool despite all efforts. On those days, it is easy to think that we're just making objects, just performing a trade, no different from a blacksmith making horseshoes or a baker making bread. But then, you prompt, but then evening comes and I walk into the church and I see the candles burning. I see brothers reading by their light, praying by their light, finding their way through darkness by their light. And I remember that the work is not about the candles themselves, but about what they enable. We do not make candles, we make it possible for life to continue through the dark hours. That is the difference. The sanctuary lamp gutters slightly, then steadies. You both watch it in silence, witness to this small moment of instability and recovery. It is a good metaphor, you think, for much of life. The constant wavering and steadying, the ongoing need for attention and care. I have another question, you say after a while. Something I have wondered about but have not understood how to ask. Ask, Brother Anselm says simply. You said months ago that being a keeper of light is harder than being a maker of light. I think I understand this now. Keeping requires continuous responsibility, not just single acts of making. But there is something else I sense beneath your words, something I have not yet grasped. What is it? Brother Anselm shifts in his seat, and you can see him weighing his response, choosing his words carefully. A maker, he says slowly, performs a task and completes it. The candle is made and the making is finished. But a keeper must live in uncertainty. You tend the flame, but you cannot control whether it continues. You can do everything correctly, trim the wick properly, use good wax, shield the flame from draughts, and still a candle may fail. A sudden wind, an imperfection you could not see, the mysterious ways that fire sometimes simply dies despite all care. He pauses, then continues. To be a keeper means accepting that you cannot guarantee outcomes. You can only be faithful in your tending. The flame may fail anyway. The darkness may return despite your best efforts. And still, you must continue tending. Continue believing that your care matters even when you cannot prove it, even when the results seem uncertain. His words settle into you like seeds into soil, their full meaning not yet apparent but waiting to grow into understanding over time. You think about all the candles you have tended, all the flames you have watched and worried over. How many of them would have burned just as well without your attention? How many would have failed despite it? There is no way to know, and that is precisely the point. You tend them anyway, not because you can guarantee success, but because tending is what faithfulness looks like. This is hard, you say quietly. Yes, Brother Anselm agrees. This is why it takes longer to learn than the simple mechanics of candle making. You must learn to live with uncertainty, to find meaning in faithful action even when you cannot measure its effects. This is not just about candles, this is about how one lives a life dedicated to service. The bells begin to ring for matins, their sound carrying through the darkness. The brothers will be rising now, making their way to the church for the first prayer of the new day. You and Brother Anselm stand, preparing to join them. "Thank you," you say, "for answering my questions." "Thank you for asking them," Brother Anselm replies. "A keeper of light must be willing to sit with questions, to live in the uncertainty of not fully knowing. Your questions tell me you are learning what cannot be taught directly, only discovered through your own wondering." You walk together from the church back toward the dormitory. The monastery is dark except for the few candles that mark safe paths through the buildings. Above, stars shine with their ancient light, and somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, dawn waits to arrive. The world turns from darkness toward light, and then back toward darkness again in its eternal rhythm. And somewhere in that turning, you and the other chandlers maintain your small flames, your modest responses to the vast darkness, faithful not because you can eliminate the dark, but because faithfulness is its own form of light, its own kind of answer to the question of how to live in a world where shadows always return, where night always falls, where every candle eventually burns down to nothing but must be replaced by another and another, in an endless succession that is itself a kind of hope, a kind of prayer, a kind of stubborn insistence that light matters, that tending matters, that the work of human hands offered in service can make a difference, even when that difference cannot be measured or proven but only lived day after day, in the patient tending of flames that flicker and steady, gutter and recover, burn and eventually fail, only to be lit again from the last spark of the one before, carrying forward a light that belongs to no one and everyone, that serves all who need to see their way through darkness. Autumn arrives with sudden cold. One morning you wake to find frost covering the cloister garden, the plants blackened and drooping. The monastery shifts back into its winter preparations, harvesting the last vegetables, bringing in firewood, checking that the buildings are sealed against wind. In the chandlery, the work intensifies. You must build up stores for the long dark months ahead. Brother Anselm assigns you to work on the large batch of Advent candles. These must be ready weeks in advance, enough to supply the church through the season of waiting that precedes Christmas. You spend your days dipping candles in steady rhythm, your hands moving through the familiar motions while your mind drifts through prayer and memory and quiet observation. A new novice arrives at the monastery. His name is Brother Gabriel, and he is young, perhaps 16 years old. The abbot assigns him to the chandlery to learn the craft. Brother Anselm gives you the task of teaching him. You learned by watching and doing, Brother Anselm says. Now you will learn by teaching. This is the next stage of understanding, to take what you know and help another person discover it for themselves. You feel uncertain about this responsibility. How can you teach when you still feel like a learner yourself? But Brother Anselm simply smiles and tells you that this doubt is natural, that everyone feels unready to teach until they begin doing it. Brother Gabriel is eager but clumsy. His hands do not yet know the work, and he makes all the mistakes you remember making in your first weeks. Wicks twisted unevenly, wax judged at the wrong temperature, candles dipped too quickly or too slowly. You watch him struggle and remember your own struggles, and something in this remembering helps you understand how to guide him. Feel the wax first, you tell him when he's about to dip at the wrong temperature. Do not trust your eyes alone. Let your fingers learn what the proper warmth feels like. He tries this, testing the wax carefully before dipping. His next candle is better, though still imperfect. You nod encouragement and let him continue, resisting the urge to correct every small mistake. Some things must be learned through repetition, through the slow accumulation of experience that cannot be rushed. Teaching Brother Gabriel occupies much of your time through the autumn weeks. You show him how to card cotton, how to twist wicks, how to measure proportions. You explain why certain herbs are added to tallow, why beeswax costs so much. why the sanctuary lamp must never go out. He listens intently, asks good questions, works hard despite his inexperience. One afternoon, he asks you the question you once asked Brother Anselm. Why did you become a chandler? You pause in your work, considering how to answer. Your reasons feel less clear than Brother Anselm's story of childhood fear and finding purpose. You came here almost by accident, sent by another monastery that had no need for an extra brother. The chandlery was where space existed, where hands were needed. You did not choose it deliberately. I am not sure I became a chandler, you say slowly. I think perhaps the work became me, shaped me into someone who could do it. When I arrived, I knew nothing about candles. Now I cannot imagine doing anything else. The craft has entered my hands, my eyes, my understanding of how the world works. Brother Gabriel nods thoughtfully and returns to his task. You watch him struggle with the spinning wheel, his foot working the treadle too fast, then too slow, searching for the rhythm. You remember this same search in yourself, and you feel a strange tenderness toward him. This young person learning what you learned, walking a path you have already walked. The days grow shorter. You work longer hours to keep pace with demand. Brother Gabriel improves steadily under your instruction, though he still requires supervision. Brother Anselm watches both of you, saying little, but you sense his approval in the way he nods when he sees Brother Gabriel's progress, in the way he entrusts you with more complex tasks. One week in late autumn, a fever spreads through the monastery. Brother Martin falls ill first, then Brother Timothy, then several others. The infirmary fills with sick brothers, and the healthy ones must take on extra duties. You find yourself working in the chandlery with only Brother Gabriel to help you, trying to maintain production while so many hands are absent. The work is exhausting. You rise early and work late, teaching Brother Gabriel while simultaneously doing the work of 3 people. The candles must continue. The church needs them. The infirmary needs them. The daily life of the community depends on them. There is no pause for sickness, no reduction in demand. Brother Gabriel tries hard but tires quickly. He is young and unused to such long hours of labour. You see him struggling to stay awake at the dipping station, his movements becoming careless with fatigue. You send him to rest and continue alone, working through the evening, through Compline, into the deep night. The chandlery is quiet except for the fire's crackle and the soft splash of wicks entering wax. Your arms ache. Your eyes burn from smoke and exhaustion. But the work continues because it must continue. You dip candles in the familiar rhythm, your hands operating almost independently of your conscious will, your mind drifting into a strange state between waking and sleep. Sometime deep in the night, Brother Anselm appears in the doorway. You did not hear him approach, and his sudden presence startles you. You should rest, he says quietly. The candles are needed, you reply. Yes, but you are needed too. A chandler who works until he collapses serves no one. Come, sleep for a few hours. I will continue here. You want to protest, to insist that you can keep working, but your body betrays you with a wave of dizziness. Brother Anselm steadies you, with a hand on your shoulder. This is also part of learning, he says gently, knowing your limits, understanding that service sometimes means accepting help, not just giving it. Go and rest. The work will be here when you wake. You make your way to the dormitory and fall onto your bed without even removing your work robe. Sleep takes you immediately, deep and dreamless. When you wake, dawnlight filters through the shutters. You have slept through matins, through lauds, through prime. For a moment panic rises. You have neglected your duties, failed in your responsibility. But then you remember Brother Anselm's words and understand that he wanted you to sleep, that this rest was itself a form of faithful service. You return to the chandlery to find Brother Anselm still working. He looks tired but moves with steady competence, his hands performing the familiar tasks with practiced ease. Several dozen new candles hang drying on the frames, work completed while you slept. Thank you, you say quietly. The community sustains itself through mutual service, Brother Anselm replies. You've been sustaining us through these difficult days. Now I sustain you. Tomorrow perhaps you will sustain someone else. This is how we continue. The fever passes gradually. Brothers recover and return to their duties. Brother Martin comes back to the chandlery, still weak but able to work. Brother Timothy follows a few days later. The crisis eases and the work returns to its normal rhythm. But something has changed in you through this experience. You learned what it means to work beyond your comfortable limits, to push through exhaustion in service of necessity. You also learned what it means to accept help, to allow others to carry your burden when you can no longer carry it yourself. Both lessons feel important, though you cannot fully articulate why. Winter solstice approaches again, your second one in the monastery. The preparations feel familiar now, almost routine. You know what must be done, how many candles are needed, which brothers will take which watches. Brother Gabriel helps with the work, and you find yourself repeating to him the same instructions that were given to you a year ago. These candles are for the longest night, you tell him, as you dip pure beeswax tapers for the vigil. They must burn cleanly without smoke, bright enough for reading prayers in the darkness. Every detail matters because every detail serves the brothers who will keep watch. Brother Gabriel nods seriously, and you see in his face the same earnest desire to do the work well that you remember feeling. The cycle continues. Knowledge passed from one set of hands to another, each generation of chandlers learning from those who came before and teaching those who come after. The night of the vigil arrives. You take your watch in the hours after midnight, sitting in the church while candles burn all around. The silence is deep, broken only by the whisper of flames and the occasional settling of wax in its holders. You pray the prayers you know by heart now, and you watch the lights. A thought comes to you unbidden, that these flames are temporary, that every one of them will eventually burn out, that the darkness always returns, and yet the community continues to light new candles, continues to make more, continues to believe that light matters despite its temporary nature. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson, not that light defeats darkness permanently, but that the act of lighting continues, that the work of tending goes on, that faithfulness does not depend on final victory but on present commitment. When your watch ends, you walk back through the dark cloister. Above, stars shine with their distant light. You think about Brother Anselm's words from months ago, that keeping light means living with uncertainty, accepting that you cannot guarantee outcomes but must be faithful anyway. This truth has sunk deeper into you through the autumn's trials, through teaching Brother Gabriel, through working until exhaustion, and then accepting rest. You are a keeper of light now, not just a maker of candles. You understand that the work is never finished, that each day requires the same attention and care as the day before, that faithfulness is measured not in final achievements, but in daily persistence. The darkness will always return, the candles will always burn down, and still you will rise each morning and return to the chandlery, will render tallow and blend wax and dip wicks and tend flames, because this is what keepers do. But even as this understanding settles into certainty, you sense there is one more lesson waiting. Something about what happens when the darkness teaches rather than threatens. When the night becomes not an enemy to defeat, but a companion in the work of understanding. What might darkness have to teach to those who spend their lives making light? Years pass in the monastery, measured not by calendars but by the rhythm of seasons and the accumulation of small changes. Brother Gabriel grows skilled under your instruction, and eventually needs little guidance. New novices arrive, and you teach them as you were taught, passing on the knowledge that was given to you. Brother Martin's hands grow too stiff with age for the delicate work, and he moves to other duties. Brother Timothy continues at the spinning wheel, his foot keeping the same steady rhythm it has kept for decades. Brother Anselm grows older. You notice it gradually, the way he moves more slowly in the mornings, the way his hands shake slightly when he holds the smallest candles, the way he sits more often and stands less. He's past 60 now, ancient by the standards of your time, but his mind remains sharp, and his understanding of the craft deepens rather than diminishes with age. One spring morning, he calls you to walk with him in the garden. The fruit trees are blooming, filling the air with their delicate scent. You walk slowly, matching your pace to his, saying nothing at first. "I have spoken with the abbot," Brother Anselm says eventually. "He agrees that it is time. When I die, you will become the Master Chandler. You will hold responsibility for maintaining the monastery's light. The words settle over you like a weight. You have known this day would come, but knowing and experiencing are different things. Brother Anselm has been your teacher, your guide, the person who showed you not just how to make candles, but how to understand what the making means. The thought of continuing without him feels impossible." "I am not ready," you say quietly. "No one ever is," Brother Anselm replies. "I was not ready when Brother Edmund died and I took his place. But readiness is not required, only willingness. Are you willing?" You think about this question. Willing. Not capable, not deserving, not perfectly prepared, just willing to continue the work, to accept the responsibility, to tend the light as faithfully as you can. "Yes," you say. "I am willing." Brother Anselm nods, satisfied. "Good. That is enough." He lives through that summer and into autumn. You work beside him as always, learning things you did not know you still needed to learn. How to order supplies from the monastery farms, how to manage the other chandlers, how to make decisions about priorities when demand exceeds supply. He teaches you the accounting, showing you the records kept in a careful hand, documenting every candle made, every pound of wax used, every bundle of wicks prepared. These records matter, he says, not because anyone checks them strictly, but because they remind us that we are stewards, not owners. The materials we use belong to the community. We must account for them, must use them wisely and well. Winter arrives early that year. Brother Anselm catches a cold that settles in his chest and will not leave. He continues working as long as he can, but eventually he must move to the infirmary. You visit him there each evening after Vespers, sitting beside his bed, telling him about the day's work in the chandlery. Brother Gabriel made a perfect batch of choir candles today, you report. Not a single imperfection. He has become a true craftsman. Brother Anselm smiles weakly. Good. You have taught him well. He will help you when I am gone. You're not gone yet, you say, but both of you know the truth. His breathing is laboured, his strength fading. The candle beside his bed, one of the death candles you helped him make years ago, burns steadily in its holder. One evening, he takes your hand in his. His grip is weak but warm. I want to tell you something, he says. Something I learned late. Something I wish I had understood earlier. The darkness is not our enemy. It is our partner. Without darkness, light would have no meaning. Without night, we would not understand the gift of day. The chandler's work exists because darkness exists. We do not fight against the dark. We dance with it. You sit with these words, turning them over in your mind, dancing with darkness rather than fighting it. Yes, you have glimpsed this truth in your own experience but have not had words for it until now. The darkness will take me soon, Brother Anselm continues. But this is not defeat. This is the natural rhythm. Light fades so that new light can be kindled. I taught you what I knew so that the knowledge would not die with me. Now you will teach others, and the light continues. This is how we answer darkness, not by defeating it, but by ensuring that light is always reborn. He dies 2 days later, in the quiet hour before dawn. The candle beside his bed burns steadily until the end. You are there, along with several other brothers, praying the prayers for the dying. When he draws his last breath, the room fills with a profound silence. The candle continues to burn, as candles do, indifferent to human death, faithful to its nature. You become the Master Chandler. The title feels strange at first, ill-fitting, but gradually you grow into it. You make the same decisions Brother Anselm made, face the same challenges, maintain the same standards. Brother Gabriel becomes your assistant, reliable and skilled. New novices arrive and you teach them, passing on what you learned, adding your own small insights to the accumulated wisdom of generations. The work continues, season after season, year after year. You render tallow in summer's heat and dip candles in winter's cold. You make rushlights for dormitories and pure beeswax tapers for the altar. You tend the sanctuary lamp, ensuring it never fails. You train young hands to twist wicks and judge wax temperature. The rhythm becomes your life, so familiar that you cannot imagine any other way of being. One day, many years after Brother Anselm's death, you realise you are teaching a novice the same lesson he taught you, that being a keeper of light means living with uncertainty, accepting that you cannot guarantee outcomes, finding faithfulness in the daily tending regardless of results. The words come out of your mouth almost exactly as he spoke them, and you feel his presence in that moment, his knowledge living on through your teaching, his understanding passed forward like a flame transferred from one candle to another. This is the true nature of the work you understand finally. Not the candles themselves, which are temporary and consumable, but the knowledge of how to make them, the commitment to continue making them, the faithful tending that passes from one generation to the next. You are part of a chain that stretches backward through Brother Anselm and Brother Edmund and countless others whose names you will never know, and forward through Brother Gabriel and this young novice and all those who will come after. The practice of chandlery in medieval monasteries influenced far more than the monks who performed it. Every scriptorium that produced illuminated manuscripts depended on chandlers who could make candles that burned cleanly enough not to damage precious parchment with smoke. Every cathedral that held evening services relied on chandlers who understood how to make light that could fill vast spaces. The craft spread from monasteries into cities, where guilds of chandlers formed, establishing standards and training apprentices according to methods first developed in places like this one. The careful record-keeping that chandlers maintained, documenting materials used, candles produced, techniques refined, contributed to the broader development of accounting practices in medieval Europe. These records were among the first systematic tracking of production and resource use, helping to establish principles that would later underpin commercial enterprises. The chandler's attention to detail, to consistency, to faithful documentation influenced how other crafts organised themselves. More subtly, the chandler's understanding of light as something that must be tended rather than conquered shaped medieval attitudes toward knowledge and faith. The metaphor of keeping light alive through darkness became central to monastic spirituality. The idea that truth and goodness must be carefully maintained, that they require daily attention, that they depend on communities of people committed to their continuation. This understanding permeated medieval thought, appearing in theology, philosophy and literature. The physical legacy of monastic chandlers can still be seen in churches that maintain eternal flames, in the traditional beeswax candles still used for certain ceremonies, in the careful attention paid to liturgical lighting. But perhaps more importantly, the chandlers left behind a way of understanding craft itself, not as mere production but as spiritual practice, not as individual achievement but as communal service, not as conquest of materials but as patient cooperation with their nature. The chandlers demonstrated that the most important work is often the most repetitive, that significance lies not in dramatic gestures but in daily faithfulness, that legacy is built through the accumulation of small acts of care rather than through singular great accomplishments. They showed that teaching is as important as doing, that knowledge must be passed forward if it is to survive, that each generation receives a trust that it must maintain and eventually hand to the next. People like you, the chandlers who spent decades making light, teaching others, tending flames, were transformed by their work in ways they often could not articulate. You entered the chandlery as a stranger to the craft and became someone for whom candle making was as natural as breathing. The work shaped your hands, marked your skin with burns that told the story of your service, but it also shaped your understanding of time, of patience, of the relationship between darkness and light. To your community, you represented continuity and reliability. You were the person who ensured that prayer could continue after sunset, that readers could study through winter evenings, that the dying need not face their final darkness alone. You were not celebrated or famous. Your work was too ordinary for that. But you were essential, trusted, depended upon. When brothers woke to find candles already lit for morning prayer, they knew your hands had been there in the darkness before them. When they read by steady lamplight, they knew your skill made that reading possible. The enduring influence of monastic chandlers extends into the present day in ways both obvious and subtle. The tradition of blessing candles, Candlemas services in February where candles for the coming year are consecrated, descends directly from practices established in medieval monasteries. The use of beeswax for special liturgical candles, the maintenance of sanctuary lamps, the attention to the quality and composition of church candles, all of these preserve knowledge first codified by monastic chandlers. But the deeper legacy lies in the understanding of craft as vocation, work as prayer, daily labour as spiritual practice. The chandler's example helped establish the idea that all honest work, performed with attention and care, participates in sacred purposes. This understanding influenced not just other monastic crafts, but the broader development of European attitudes toward labour, skill, and the dignity of manual work. In a world increasingly illuminated by electric light, constant, reliable, requiring no daily tending, the chandler's wisdom becomes perhaps more rather than less relevant. The understanding that light must be carefully made, that it depends on human attention, that darkness is not an enemy but a partner in the rhythm of existence. These insights speak to contemporary needs. They remind us that the most important things often require patient maintenance rather than dramatic intervention, that communities sustain themselves through networks of quiet service, that knowledge and skill must be passed from hand to hand if they are to survive. The traditions the chandlers established persist wherever people gather to mark significant moments with candlelight. Birthday candles that must be blown out and relit each year, memorial candles lit for the dead, vigil candles held during services of hope and lamentation. Each of these practices carries forward the ancient understanding that flame is more than illumination, that the act of lighting and tending fire connects us to something profound about human existence, about our partnership with darkness, about our need to create and maintain light, even knowing that it will eventually fail and must be lit again. In quiet monasteries and busy churches, in cathedrals and chapels, the work continues. Someone rises before dawn to light the first candles. Someone checks that the sanctuary lamp still burns. Someone makes sure that when evening comes and darkness gathers, there will be light, not because darkness can be permanently defeated, but because the community has committed itself to the faithful work of tending flame, of teaching the craft to new hands, of ensuring that the light passes forward, generation after generation, a small persistent answer to the vast darkness, burning steadily through the night until dawn arrives and the whole patient cycle begins again. The chandler's legacy is written not in grand monuments, but in countless small flames, each one tended by hands that learned from other hands, each one burning briefly but connected to an unbroken chain of light that stretches backward into the past and forward into an unknowable future. And in that chain, that patient succession of flames carefully tended and faithfully maintained, lives a truth about human existence itself, that we are all keepers of light in our own ways, all responsible for tending what must not be allowed to die, all part of a continuity larger than ourselves, our small daily acts of care rippling forward through time, creating light for people we will never meet, In darkness we will never see, because the keeping of light is not about us, but about the light itself, and about the community that depends on its continuation, and about the mystery of how temporary human hands can tend something eternal, how mortal craft can serve immortal purpose, how the flickering candle flame becomes, through patient attention and faithful service, something far greater than itself, a prayer, a hope, a promise that darkness is not the final word, that light returns, that someone will always tend the flame,